Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. The blockade on the road to Winnipeg's Brady Landfill has been taken down. It went up roughly 2 weeks ago after the Manitoba government announced it will not support a search of landfills for the remains of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Tamara Pimentel has more.
Elder Geraldine Shingu smudges a red dress mural painted on the road to the Brady Landfill. It's where a blockade stood moments before.
They just come in and sweep everything away, but they didn't sweep away all our prayers. They didn't sweep away all our voices or our way. We're still going to carry on.
The City of Winnipeg removed the blockade Tuesday morning in response to an injunction order that was granted last week. Inspector Gord Spado with Winnipeg Police says it was done in a peaceful way.
Protesters removed things they wanted to keep off of the roadway, and that allowed the city to come in and assist us in removing the material that was still blocking the road.
Protesters had been blocking the road for 2 weeks after Manitoba's Premier Heather Stephenson made the decision to not search the Brady or Prairie Green landfills. It is believed that Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and Buffalo Woman can be in either landfill. At a press conference on Monday, experts told the media that a search is feasible and has been done many times before. And those calling on a search say it isn't over. Derek Nepenak is chief of Pine Creek First Nation and a cousin to Tanya Nepenak, whose remains may also be in the Brady landfill. She went missing in 2011. Police believe she was killed by an alleged serial killer.
For a very long time, we've been witnessing our loved ones ending up in this dump. And it's heartbreaking and it's tragic. And oftentimes we don't have the words to even speak about the violence that we witness in our lives day to day.
A camp called Camp Morgan will remain standing near the Brady landfill, and a new one is expected to be set up outside the Canadian Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg, and that will be called Camp Mercedes. Before allowing the city to sweep up debris from the blockade, Shingoose held a pipe ceremony to bring closure.
We need to continue their voice, bring their voice, because they want to go home. They want their families to take them home and rest. Like they deserve a proper burial.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
NDP Member of Parliament Leah Gazan has written a submission to a United Nations panel calling for a study into the failure of all levels of government to support a search for the remains of 2 Indigenous women. She joins us now in studio. Leah, thanks for taking some time for us. Let's start with the developments today, though, and the removal of the blockade at the Brady landfill. Just your thoughts on that coming down less than 2 weeks after it went up.
Well, I think the bigger point here is the fact that, families are having to plead with all levels of government to seek justice for their loved ones is unfortunate. Certainly the protests so far have been peaceful, and I know that there's plans to move to the Human Rights Museum with support from folks at the Human Rights Museum, and I continue to support the need to search the landfills.
Now, you've recently written the United Nations to call for action. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I actually wrote a submission to the Special Rapporteur back in February about the failure of all levels of government in responding to the crisis of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. This is a follow-up to the submission I made in February to the expert mechanism on the rights of Indigenous peoples to review the need for a study for international oversight of the search of the landfills because of examples of ongoing systemic violence. Certainly the women that were victims that we're currently searching for, Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris and Buffalo Woman were all victims of failures of systemic racism. You know, now this is another example, and I think it requires international oversight to make sure families and certainly the Indigenous communities are protected from this ongoing systemic racism that persists in Canada.
Now you mentioned it, you know, there has been this jurisdictional fight over who said do what and pay for what when it comes to the landfill search. Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller again today taking some shots at the Manitoba Premier. How do we move past that?
Well, I mean, I think the bigger picture here is the government passed Bill C-15 to fully adopt the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Winnipeg has signed up as a human rights city, and that means that they need to uphold the basic human rights that are articulated in articles in UNDRIP. That includes Article 7, Articles 21 and 22 that certainly apply in this case, and I would argue as well Article 12. The feds have judiciary obligations here, but also the city and province have obligations here. I do agree, and I'm hoping that the Premier will reconsider her position, but I call on all levels of government to stop pointing fingers, to stop with the jurisdictional games and do the right thing and search the landfills and provide the families whatever they should need for justice, and that could include anything from that to providing actual compensation for the families. Let's not forget the province continued to use that landfill after the police came out and said that they suspected that certainly Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron were in the landfill. That was under their jurisdiction and certainly an act of contaminating an active crime scene. So I think we need to stop pointing fingers, and everybody needs to do what they need to do to uphold human rights that are articulated in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Families deserve justice. Our communities deserve justice.
Just quickly and lastly here, Leah, where do you think things go next with the possibility of a land search? Do you think we'll see a search happen before the snow flies?
Well, you know, that's certainly not up to me, but I can tell you I'm going to continue supporting families, supporting our community. Let's not forget the federal government to date has only responded to 2 calls to justice of the 231 calls for justice in the National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls. This has become a normalized genocide in this country. This has become normalized violence, and I'm going to continue to speak up against it.
Leah, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate you taking the time for us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, still in Winnipeg, it was an emotional day in a packed courtroom as 2 Anishinaabe men convicted of murder 50 years ago were declared innocent. King's Bench Chief Justice Glenn Joyal told Brian Anderson and Alan A.J. Woodhouse they were innocent and deserved an apology. He cited systemic and individual racism in the men's convictions for the 1974 murder of Ting Fong Chan in downtown Winnipeg. Innocence Canada lawyers Jerome Kennedy and James Lockyer represented the pair. Anderson and Woodhouse spoke to reporters gathered outside the court.
When I was taking the stand, the system in itself, the way it is written really well. It's just the practice of it, that's where we fail. And I think the judge covered that area also when he said that we are human, but that was also an excuse because we claim to be, or at least we pursue to be perfect when we fail because we don't want to pursue that area, or else we don't want to admit we could be wrong.
Well, life, I want to live too, but I need to be free, have a happy life. I have a good family, people support me, and that's where it's at. So life is good.
The men's lawyers wouldn't say if Woodhouse and Anderson will seek compensation, but say the case will have broader implications for all Indigenous people wrongfully convicted in Canada. You can find much more on this story on our website, aptnnews.ca. A new report details a culture of sexual misconduct, harassment, and discrimination at the Assembly of First Nations. That story's coming up after the break. Welcome back. With the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in the forefront for many years now, some say it's time for another inquiry, this time with a focus on men and boys. APTN's Tamara Pimentel spoke with a mother bringing her son's story to Parliament Hill.
8 years after her son's death, Rochelle Dubois is making the trek from Regina to Ottawa to call for a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous men, boys, and Two-Spirit people.
Our family was deeply affected by the healthcare system, by the justice system, by the education system, all of it. We're tired of being mistreated.
Making a stop in downtown Winnipeg, Dubois speaks of her son, Haven Dubois, who at just 14 years old died in 2015. Haven drowned in a creek in Regina during school hours. A coroner's report found marijuana to be a contributing factor and deemed his death accidental. Rochelle feels it was not an accident and has been calling on the Saskatchewan Coroner's Service for an inquest into her son's death. After years of fighting for answers, the province confirmed an inquest will happen. Alongside Haven's photo is one of Rochelle's uncle, Stephen, who she says was mistreated on the last days of his life while in care at a Regina hospital. This march is also for him.
I do believe that every First Nation has somebody on their reserve who has been mistreated by the healthcare system or has been affected by a missing and murdered Indigenous loved one.
APTN first met Rochelle at a camp outside the Saskatchewan legislature in 2018, a demonstration in response to the deaths of Colton Bushy and Tina Fontaine and the acquittals of the accused in both cases. But for Rochelle, it was also a fight for her son. In Winnipeg, Sandy Banman supports the call for a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous men and boys. Her son Carl Banman was 31 years old when he went missing from Morden, Manitoba in 2011. His body was found in a creek outside of town. Banman has been a strong advocate during the MMIW movement, but says now it's time to switch gears.
I still feel like we have to start raising up our men. We have to start realizing that they're getting murdered at 2 or 3 times, 4 times the rate as the women, and they're just as sacred. The men are going missing for much different reasons, so I think there should be different things that they look at and try to prevent and solve what's going on. It's outrageous how many men are getting murdered.
Sandy has never met Rochelle in person, but supports all that she is doing to bring the issue to light.
For me, it feels like she's walking for my son too. She's walking for my Carlos too.
Rochelle and her supporters have over 2,000 kilometers to go until making it to Parliament Hill, where they hope to meet with the Assembly of First Nations. A timeline for Haven's inquest is yet to be determined. The Saskatchewan government says the public will be notified at least 2 weeks before it is scheduled. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A new report was tabled at last week's Assembly of First Nations that highlights sexual orientation and gender-based discrimination within the organization. Here's Sarah Connors with reaction.
Unwanted touching, bullying, and comments about pornography. They're just some of the findings of a new report on sexual orientation and gender-based discrimination within the AFN. The independent investigative review was presented to chiefs last week during the 44th General Assembly. It revealed a long-standing organizational culture of sexual misconduct, predatory practice, harassment, and discrimination.
We had fallen into a culture of keeping our stories quiet and not taking action.
The AFN Yukon region strongly supported a resolution to launch the review. It hopes its findings will showcase the need for change and healing within the organization.
Leaders, and we need to create a safe environment for all individuals working to advance the issues of Indigenous governments and cultures.
But I don't think this is something that only happens at the AFN.
For Chief Ali Bear, the AFN is not different than many other colonized institutions. She says it now has the opportunity to be a role model when it comes to promoting a safe work environment.
If we don't talk about it, then we're never going to have a solution for it. And it's going to continue to happen to the younger generations that continue to come into these spaces.
AFN Interim National Chief Joanna Bernard said its executive committee was deeply disturbed by the findings and would enforce measures to provide a respectful workplace, including a zero-tolerance policy.
We have to take action. There is no room for setting aside policy changes and procedural changes anymore.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Thanks, Sarah. One more quick break and then we will bring you plenty of highlights from today's action at the North American Indigenous Games. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Yesterday, you may remember we had an amazing photo of a teepee, and here's another. Teresa Trifo sent in this beauty. This teepee set up at the St. Louis Cultural Camp. We're not sure where that is. Let us know, because I see photos from there all the time. Send us your photos. It could be our next photo of the day to share at aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 27 with showers in Halifax, 25 in Fredericton, rain and 19 in Kuujjuaq, cloudy and 22 for Nain, 25 with rain in Montreal, 22 and rain for Val-d'Or, 21 with cloud in Sault Ste. Marie, rain and 24 for North Bay, chilly 15 with showers in Thunder Bay, 20 and rain in Kapuskasing, 23 in Churchill, 19 in God's Lake, 25 with rain in Winnipeg, showers, and 23 in Dauphin. Rain and 22 for Regina, 18 with rain in North Battleford. 26 in Uranium City, 18 with showers for Meadow Lake. In Northern Alberta, showers and 24 for High Level and Peace River. Rain in Edmonton and a high of 20, 28 under sunny skies for Lethbridge. Sun's out and 26 for Vancouver, 32 under the sun in Kamloops. Smoke and 23 for Prince George, 25 in Smithers. 27 with rain in Old Crow, 22 with showers for Whitehorse. The smoke will be around and 28 for Yellowknife and Fort Simpson. 22 for Sax Harbor, 25 in Inuvik. Sunny and 20 for Baker Lake, 17 in Whale Cove and Arviette, 12 in Resolute, 8 in Arctic Bay. Well, as this year's North American Indigenous Games continue, lacrosse is one of 3 traditional Indigenous sports. Prior to one of the marquee games between Wisconsin and host Nova Scotia, there was a small opening ceremony. Our Daryl Stranger has those highlights.
With cheers and support from the packed stands at the RBC Centre, the 16 and under men's Nova Scotia team entered the arena with a traditional dance.
I'm so excited to welcome everyone here today.
Following their entrance, there were words from Wagmatcook Chief Norman Bernard. A ceremonial face-off was the final step in the small ceremony before the game. The game between Wisconsin and Nova Scotia was tightly contested throughout, with plenty of hard-hitting action. Goals from Nova Scotia had them out to an early 4-0 lead. But Team Wisconsin was not going down without a fight. The game remained close until the final buzzer, which saw the hosts walk away with a 7-5 victory. For Nova Scotia's Brody Boyd, to play in front of the home fans and family was an experience like no other.
That was crazy. We never play in this rink, and the other ones don't got stands, so this was nice to play in. Just play for our family.
Despite the loss, Team Wisconsin players said the atmosphere gave them energy throughout.
The cheering is almost like just like another boost to yourself. You make a big play, or the team makes a big play, you gotta do something. It's just like the crowd is nothing I've ever experienced before.
Usually when we play field lacrosse, there's not usually that many people, but I came out here, I was like, holy, they're all these people just came here to see us play. So I was amazed how many people came out. So it was nice.
Boyd has a passion for lacrosse that includes playing for others.
I play for family, I play for my teammates, I play for everyone else, and it's just fun. I just play for the ones who can't.
Even with all of the slashing, hitting, and trash talk, everyone came together at the end of the game to meet up and give their respects, something the Wisconsin players enjoyed.
I got hit over there, I felt my back crack when I hit the wall, and then there was a lot of trash talk between us, and then I thought that we wasn't gonna get along after the game, but after the game we all shook up, and then like we was all just, you know, like glad to make it out. You know, it was actually fun.
I love how, you know, we all come together, and after the game we just, you know, after all the intense, you know, like just shoving and stuff and, you know, pushing, is just we all like Indigenous people at the end of the day, so we can just all come together and just really appreciate the sport.
Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Dartmouth.
Great action there. Nice to have the home team win. Nice to be playing in front of big crowds too. Well, official competition started yesterday at the North American Indigenous Games, and several sports, including volleyball, opened to enthusiastic crowds. The under-19 volleyball team from Alberta and Nunavut played their opening games this morning. A loud crowd was on hand to support both teams. While the points were traded back and forth, Team Alberta survived a late rally from Team Nunavut to take the win in 2 straight sets.
Oh, that was a pretty good game. Our first set was a little rough off the start, but we picked it up and we got it going. We started off like a little bit not too great. Our serves were a little bit messed up, but it was good. It was good.
And we will continue to have plenty of great coverage from NAG right here. You can also find much more on the action at NAG over on our website, aptnnews.ca. That is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. Marcy, thanks for joining us. Stick around for face-to-face and an encore presentation of our interview with Res Dog Paulina Alexis. That's next. Have a great night.